fathers or parents being stern with their children? Is there a limit to where it can be too extreme? If it can be, you know, too overbearing? If, you know, I believe there are pros and cons to both. I happen to be raised in a household where my father was very strict. My mother was the nurturer that she was, you know, created to be in the form of a mom, a wife, and a woman, right? And so I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to have a balance, though it was confusing at times. I'm not going to even lie to you, you know, especially when they bumped heads and maybe they didn't see eye to eye on certain things. And, you know, whether they discussed it in front of me or they didn't, you know, you can pick up on certain things, right? So I thought that David Banner's, I love David Banner. He's evolved as a man, he keeps evolving. And I know over a period of time, I have definitely learned a lot from him, as others, you know. So I want to touch on it. Those that are watching the replay, definitely tap that like button. For any new subscribers that have come on board, I truly appreciate you and thank you for, you know, doing so and becoming a part of Miss 𝘰𝘱𝘺𝘺𝘨𝑒𝘍𝑚𝑒's tribe, right? So I appreciate everybody, and we're gonna go on and get right off into it. There's an old saying and an old adage that says that we're never given a manual or a handbook when we have children. So nobody gives us clear-cut instructions because there aren't any. Everyone is different, dynamics are different, chemistry is different, upbringing is different, backgrounds are different, cultures are often different, especially in, you know, the times that we're living in. It's a lot more acceptable and a lot more of the norm than in the past, right? Maybe 100 years, even 50 years from now. So there's just a lot of different variables to actually look at and to consider. So again, there can be pros and there can be cons, and we're going to discuss them. So without further ado, peace to the chat, peace to the chat. Let's listen to what David Banner has to say.
I'm gonna tell you how hard my dad is. I got my dad's name tattooed on my arm. I've never said his first name in his presence. I don't even think I said his first name before I got it tattooed on my arm. He was dead. But I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, are we cool now because I got all this money? Or I have all this money? He said, No, I didn't need no fucking friends. He said, my only job was to make sure that you were a man that can navigate itself through this evil world. And if I end up leaving here, that could take care of your mother and your brother.
So let's unpack that for a minute, because he definitely covered some different topics. First of all, he made mention that his dad didn't even smile, or he doesn't remember his dad smiling until he was 21 years old. Now, my the information that I have reveals that he raised him as his own son. So he was in his life and has, or he's passed on now, but he was in his life for most of his life. So he raised him. That's the only dad he knows. That's the only dad he acknowledges as a father, as dad, right? And yet and still, he's never mentioned his name in his presence by name. And then again, he was a grown man before his dad even smiled in his presence, in his recollection, which is the perspective that we're speaking from. Now, I can't imagine, because like, had he not said this, if you look and you watch and you followed David Banner, he always smiles. He has a very inviting smile, a very sincere smile. It's very authentic. And I believe that it's intentional. Now it's habit, but when he first, came onto the scene, in his journey, he was a lot more serious. And I think as, life started lifing and he started getting older and wiser, he even says that he had to unlearn and relearn a lot of things because, of course, he was taught a certain set of values that did not necessarily serve him in the best interest of his journey once he became older, more mature, and again, living more life. But there definitely, he's making it very, very apparent that he has the utmost respect for his father, whether his father has transitioned, when his father was here, now how he felt as far as, you know, love and all of those intimate details when it comes to the feelings aspect of it. But it didn't take away from the fact that either his father commanded and demanded respect and he gave it out of that, whether he did it based off of him loving his father despite his father not being open when it came to being affectionate with David Banner, or maybe a combination of that and then some others in both, right? So let's just listen a little bit further and see what he has to say.
He said, now that I know that you can do that, pass the Hennessy. And when my dad became my best friend, like, he was diagnosed with cancer. Like, I hated my dad. Not hate, like I wanted him to die, but I didn't like him. But when I found out that was so painful, because I was all that he talked about at work. You know, his friends told me that I was all he talked about all the time, and he was proud. He would never let me know that. Show you something, bro. One time, first time I got all A's in high school, I came home and pass this to me, Small. This is my report card, right?
Okay.
My dad came. My dad picked up the newspaper, kept reading. I was still standing there. He said, "What the fuck? You talking about this bullshit?" He said, "This what the fuck you supposed to do." He said, "I don't see no damn fireworks going off when you cut the lights on. I don't see no fucking standing ovation when there's food on the table." He said, "As a man, good is what you supposed to do." And that's why I was telling you earlier, man, like when we talked off camera, why it's hard for me to brag on the God box, because I'm supposed to be fucking dope. Being dope is what you're supposed to do if you selling products, because if it's easy to do, then it's not an art form. And if it's easy to do and your little brother can do it, then why should they buy your shit? But what I realized is if Southerners are not egocentric to a certain degree, that they'll pass us up. They tried to pass the West Coast over until they start stomping on buildings. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like you have to adopt the way that white folks act in order for even our own people to respect you.
Listen. Listen. So hold on, y'all. Okay, so listen, that's powerful, right? And this is when I started to like, okay, I remind myself, you are not a man, you are a woman. Not that I really have to, but when you internalize and you receive certain information that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, like for me, I gotta pause and I gotta like, okay, I gotta explain it to myself. I gotta talk it through. I gotta walk it out. I keep going back to the title when he says, my dad didn't smile at me until I was 21. But he just said that he found out, and if I'm not correct, if I am correct, once his dad transitioned and he passed on, that's when he found out that that was all his dad talked about, that he was much more endeared with David Banner, not in his presence than in his presence. Now, I don't know how to feel about that. I'm going to keep it a buck, because it's like once you're gone, and I got to find out through other people how you truly felt about me, because based off of the delivery that David Banner says that his dad gave him, he might have found it difficult to believe that his dad, that he looked at his sternness as a form of a love language, as a form of love. He cared more about preparing him. But in your formative years, whether you're a male or a female, a lot of times we look at things on the surface and from face value, right? And so if his dad was delivering it that way, now he did say he was a chief of a fire department. So I actually was good friends with chief of a fire department some years back. So I understand. I get it. I definitely can relate to the mindset of a true leader, of somebody that has a lot of responsibility, that the expectations are endless for people in certain positions and certain, statures in life. So there's so many different variables and so many different things that can be mentioned that could contribute to how did we get here, and how can people benefit and make it applicable to their situation, and not not absorb so much of the negative, right, as opposed to the positive. Takes chewing the meat and spitting out the bones is how I often hear it, right? So definitely but again, it's like, okay, so David Banner, through his own words, is saying that he was totally unaware and oblivious to his father absolutely having the respect, the love, the admiration, and being proud of him. But it wasn't directly to David Banner. So is there a cliff in this topic? Is there such a thing as going too far? Is there such a thing as maybe overdoing it, even though your intentions were good? Because now, who knows why I don't live his life, don't know him outside of what he tells us, right? And so, what one thing that I am familiar with is that David Banner developed a substance problem or an alcohol problem for some years. He's recovered, he's elevated, grown, and outgrown that addiction. However, it had gotten really severe. So it just pauses the question, if we don't get that love and that substance from our life givers, or the ones that, nurture us and raise us and instill foundational principles into our lives, then how do we know what to expect going out into the expanded world, right? Where people don't have any of those things invested in us. So I found this to be fascinating, interesting, and it evokes like all kind of responses from me. Like, I can see the value, absolute value in it, and then I can see how it could have been misconstrued as something totally different, because his dad was super intentional about not babying him, about not coddling him, and what that looks like for him, and the dynamic of their relationship. It's not going to look the same to everybody else. He's going to interpret that based off of his life's experiences, what he was taught, what he wasn't taught, what he felt he failed at, what he excelled at. All of these different characteristics played a part. But one thing is for sure, is that was his way of displaying that he was super invested and he loved him. Even if David Banner did not know it at the time, to the degree at the time, could it have changed his mindset? But I will say this: evidently, for David Banner to be who he is today, and to be in his own right, whether he sought out that purpose or not, he's a leader, has leadership qualities, very assured. Those things had to have come from his dad. So basically, does the good outweigh the bad at this point? And where do we go from here? And how can we take some jewels and some gems and apply them to our own personal situations, if we do at all? Let's continue, y'all.
So, like, the only reason why I let people know that the God Box is one of the best albums ever, not just my best album, because if I don't, you're going to act like that shit didn't happen at all. You feel what I'm saying? So, and I saw that, man, when I did the hip hop cypher with BET. one of the staff members at BET said, you know, there was a conversation that was being held that David Banner had one of the best hip hop cypher verses ever, and the world act like they didn't. Like it was like a roach in the room. Me and Crit I had a joke. Me and I was telling Crit this joke. I said they try to treat us like San Antonio. When the San Antonio Spurs win the championship, Sports Illustrated run they shit for 2 days. If it's anybody else, it's through the whole month. You can get a T-shirt here. You can get this. You know, it's the titties on the cover or whatever. You feel me? But I'm not gonna let them chump this off. So
I just want to throw in this footnote. I remember when the God Box came out. I remember the marketing. He did all of his own marketing. He did all of his own production. He was hands-on with the entire process, the presentation, the boxing of it, the launching, the networking, having a bunch of people that was either on his team or connected with him. It was so personal to him. And every time I saw him launch it or, you know, promote it, because it was in the works, and he promoted it throughout the entire, once he got the name of it and had the vision set, he was promoting it. So I remember it being promoted almost, I think maybe 8 months to maybe about 10 months before it was ever released, right? One thing that I can remember that he used to always reiterate and repeat was that this is going to be the best album ever. Ever. Out of all the albums, out of all of the artists, out of all of the releases, out of all of the people that, you know, like I said, he promoted and produced and managed his own product. So he didn't have the big record companies behind him on this project. This was something, and for him to have the assurance enough to say that this is going to be and every time he said it, you believed him. You absolutely believed him, right? Exactly, 𝘍𝘭𝘥𝘭𝘢. He certainly used it to help build a strong man out of his son, but also we all have trials. I agree with that 100%. And so he's saying, you know, he found a recipe for him to iterate and to live by, that this is what I'm supposed to do, but I'm the best at whatever I choose to do. Again, qualities that he says was instilled by his father, and he's going to explain that a little bit more. Let's keep it pushing. Come on, y'all. It's not long, but this is a clip where everything he says is super powerful and impactful. And even if we don't use this in one aspect, these are still gems. This is what I love about wisdom, is that you can apply it to any type of different avenue of your life, of your relationships. Apply it to certain circumstances that may not have anything to do with the source of how you learned it or received it in the first place.
Oh, you know, my dad taught me a valuable lesson, but in this case, we won't go down in history unless we fight for our culture.
Now, you said your dad was a disciplinarian. So was it a 2-parent household?
Yes.
Oh. Because the way you talked about him is almost like they were separated.
No, it's just that, I'm gonna tell you what, I'm gonna be very honest with you. Now that I'm older, because I used to always say, mom, my mama's boy. But my dad used to always tell me, you keep laying up under your mama, you're gonna be weak. And
y'all, I'm sorry. Listen, mark this down. This is coming from me. There's a lot of truth to that. I won't say it's all true and it's always true, because everybody is so dynamically different. But overall, if you look at it from a cultural standpoint, you look at it from a where we are standpoint, and you look at the percentage of single moms raising sons without the fathers in the home, and we talk about this all the time, the generations are getting weaker. And I mean male and female, but just for the sake of conversation, we are speaking on the male aspect. And I'm telling you, when he said that, it resonated with me. It was a harsh truth, because as much as single moms, we want to raise our boys to be sons, we weren't created for that role. We were not equipped to be able to do that. And boys don't respond to male energy like female energy, especially when that female energy has birthed that son, right? There is a bond, an interconnected bond that is often unspoken and undeniable. It just goes with the territory of combining. You got the same blood running through your children or your sons as you do the mothers. So it's going to be a whole different dynamic. But he's absolutely right. And he said that he was at some point a self-proclaimed mama's boy. So for him to say that and then to basically say what I had to unlearn and relearn, but it also reiterates when I said a little bit earlier, I see how it can be a little confusing. I really do. When you have such a hyper different dynamic of a male energy and a female energy. So it seems as if they had definitely differences in beliefs on how to raise children. And it may have been totally unintentional because his mom was just being his mom. She was in her essence. She was in her role naturally. And then his dad was in his naturally, right? But because David Banner is a male and his dad is a male, they're going to be able to interact, communicate, and relate more effectively, especially in his older years developing into manhood. So I just wanted to say that because that is super important. It's cool to baby your kids when they're little for a little while. They're going to know that you love them. There are different love languages, right? However, you can actually set them up for failure and even worse if you don't relinquish that and understand that they're no longer going to be babies at some point and you're going to have to release them into the world. That's why you got a lot of these grown ass men that are still they don't know how to get off the mama's titty. And that's just, it is what it is. You know, I watch a lot of videos it just fascinates me how people like the arrest videos, like cops, they arrest people in different scenarios. But I don't care if they're stealing cars, if they're stealing stuff out of Walmart, if it's a domestic situation, if it's an eviction situation. A lot of them all have one thing in common. A lot of them call for their mamas. Okay, you got 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. I want to call, they don't talk about calling their attorneys as much as they talk about calling their mamas. So, you know, definitely there was some foresight, some wisdom, and a level of understanding that at that time DB didn't even receive or was aware of the lesson or the type of rearing that his dad, he didn't understand it. He misconstrued it as he don't love me, but he's so strict that he stifles me, especially when you start getting into them teenage years. Okay, can't tell them nothing, couldn't tell me nothing. So I know, like I know who I know, what I know. And now you looking sideways, right? So anyway, let's continue, y'all.
You know, I literally had to relearn all the stuff that he was trying to tell me. Like, it was easier to run to my mom. My mother is who honed and supported my artistic side. But the stuff that people like about David Banner, the way that I hold myself, my ethics, what I stand for, that's my dad.
Boom. Boom. He said, I learned my artistic side from my mother, but the things that people like about me, the mental toughness, the respect for structure and authority, the drive to succeed and prove myself, that came from my dad. That came from dad. Okay. So definitely, as he said, he had to unlearn and relearn. Unlearn and relearn. Most of us at some points plural, points with an S in our lives, have to unlearn and relearn. That's what they call life. Adjusting, making realizations, coming to realizations. People, in my opinion, learn until they take their last breath. There's always something you can wake up and learn on that particular day. But he said I had to unlearn and relearn that though my mother gave me what she was supposed to give me, what she could give me, and what she gave me that she felt would facilitate good in my life, that would instill some things that were going to be beneficial to me, the stuff, the meat and potatoes of who I became came from my dad.
As a matter of fact, he's actually not my blood father, but I call the other dude the donor. I never seen him before.
Oh,
That's why. So everybody who think like that is my real father, as far as I'm concerned. But my mom says that I act more like him than his blood son does, and that they said if you feed them long enough, they start looking like him. And people who look at me and him together think that that's like my blood father, but I wouldn't call him anything else. That's why I tattooed his name. Like that is my father, 𝘰𝘺𝘀𝘀.
now Father's Day is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
When that comes around, and obviously your father has passed on, what happens on a day like that?
Don't bother me. My father told me before he died, he was at peace with what he had done and how he had lived his life. And as a matter of fact, I had become friends with one of the top surgeons, maybe on this earth. And he was going to do a special trial. You know, he said he was willing to take on my father's case. And my dad said he didn't even want it. He said he was accepted his fate and he cool with it. So he didn't raise me like that. My dad didn't raise me to be all emotional. And, you know.
That's important. That's important. And I think that is probably one of the keys to why he was able to receive the way that his dad decided to interact with him, raise him, or lack thereof, was because he did not lead with emotion, and he definitely separated the two. We're not going to mix emotion with becoming a man. These are things that foundational principles, even though my delivery may be what it is, you, my son, you should be able to see through that. You should be able to pick up what I'm putting down, chew the meat, spit out the bones. My delivery ain't gonna always be perfect, but look past my delivery and can you peep the message? If a man or a woman is intentional on a consistent basis about life, about how they speak, what they say, the decisions they make, how calculative they are, if they're planners, if you can bank on the words coming out of their mouths to be true, to be just, those different qualities typically will shine through a person's delivery if it's consistently delivered that way. That was just his dad's way. It was his way of interacting. Unfortunately, there are a lot of younger, or not even younger, just a lot of men or males out here that would not have received it the way, or it wouldn't necessarily have converted into the wisdom that he intended for David Banner to get, right? So David got the memo. He got the message. Even if it was after his dad passed on a larger scale, it came evidently when it was supposed to, is what I'm saying. But we have to understand that there are different ways that people express love, and it's not always goo goo gaga, hugs, kisses, reaffirmations, giving them trophies just because they participated. These are things that are expected out of you in life. How are you going to respond? How are you going to deal with it? Are you going to respond based off of the emotion as opposed to logic, right? And so when his dad separated the emotion or just totally dispelled it altogether, he thought it was powerful enough to do that, to the point where, again, David Banner's words is that my dad didn't smile in my presence at me until I was 21 years old. 21 years old. And yet and still, David Banner has one of the most beautiful smiles, and consistent. He's always smiling. It's like a trademark of his. It's an identifying characteristic of his. So for him to be able to delve into that portion that he wasn't initially taught from a man that he did nothing but love and respect, man, that says something. Let's go.
He lives with me. And this is what I tell people, how you know you have a good parent. When you hear their voice in your head and long gone, I can give you this example. My dad used to watch me do something like walk over a piece of paper on the ground, right? And he'll wait to the 13th time. He would be like, hey, motherfucker, didn't you see that paper on the ground? It took you more effort to step over the paper 13 motherfucking times than it did to pick it up that one time and it be over with. My dad would do stuff like, he would make me mow the yard. And he would come outside and he was like, how long does it take for you to mow this yard? I say 2 hours. I'd be mad as shit, but not so here, because my dad could, before he caught cancer, before he contracted cancer, my father could press with his feet 800 pounds. And I'm gonna tell you something else about him. But he said, how long does it take you to mow the yard? I said, 2 hours. He said, how long does it take me? I said, an hour. He said, why you out here fighting to fucking work? Go ahead and get it done. You could have been gone and done whatever you want to. Just do the work. And I hear him to this day when I step over a piece of paper or when I'm mad about something that ain't my fault. Well, it don't matter if it's your fault or not. It's your business. Get it done. So I think about my dad every day. That's why I tattooed his name on. I said, what arm do I look at the most? And for some reason, I think I was supposed to naturally have been left-handed. My mom is left-handed. Mm. So usually when I wake up, I look to my left side. So I never forget him. I think about him every day. So Father's Day is not a very special day to me because I think about him every day in my life.
Or an emotional one.
Because his dad, he loved his dad every day. He had such a high respect and high regard for his dad that, again, and he said this several times during this clip, that I never, ever even mentioned his name in his presence. But yet and still, he's got his name tattooed on his arm. And he even was so intentional and forthcoming to say that when I was going to decide which arm I was going to put the tattoo on, it was the one that I looked at the most. And because my mother is left-handed and I think I should have been left-handed, I favored my left arm. So that was the arm that his name went on. Now, this is an adult man that went through all of those steps to articulate how he felt about his dad and how much respect he had for his father, or has for his father. I know his father's transitioned. We're almost done with this. Let's go.
Or an emotional one. Or if not every day of my life, when I look at my arm.
It's almost like an analogy of a hit record. When you can turn a record off, in my opinion, and the record still is in your head.
Still reverberating in your head.
A year, 2 years, 5, 10 years from now, a timeless hit record.
Uh-oh, my
That's
bad,
you know
y'all.
It's almost like an analogy of you still hear your father's voice, right?
Look at that smile. Look at that smile. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction for him. It's automatic. That's how you know he's found peace. Like I've seen in the chat, he's been spiritually awakened. And I'm telling you, it will change your appearance, your entire appearance from the inside out. Inside has to be addressed first. But we all, I was talking to my son this past week, and we were having like a really heart-to-heart conversation. And he said, Ma, he said, sometimes I feel like there's so much dysfunction in the world. I said, it is. I said, every family, because sometimes he'll go around his little friends, his little homies or whatever, and their home life would look a little different. and then he'll mill it around in his head for a bit, and then he'll come to me and he'll ask like little questions that maybe he doesn't have the answers to, trying to formulate an opinion or the right answer in his head, if that makes any sense. But my point in saying this is that I let him know, I said, honey, there's a level of dysfunction in every family. This world and the times that we're living in encapsulates a large amount of dysfunction. So we have to be aware of that. Now, with that being said, God is God at the end of the day. God is still over all at the end of the day. And this is a prime example, and I can relate to this, that when your relationship with God increases and strengthens, there's a level of peace, of happiness, of serenity, and of calmness that absolutely emits from God through us to everything that we touch and everyone that we are around. That's my personal testimony. That is not my opinion.
Good father. Now, what's one thing your dad did for you that you will never forget?
One thing my dad did for me that I never forget. I don't know how positive it is.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know how positive it is, but my father had a thing where I knew that if he would make me mad, he would always hit me in my head and say, think. And I used to think he was being so mean because he would always touch my head. And as you growing up and you get 16, you start feeling yourself like, why is this dude touching me? But now that I practice meditation, you can think yourself out of any situation. And whenever you get angry, that means that you want to become carnal and release your ability to think. Stay intact. Think. I don't care how many I don't care what you do. I don't care whether you fight, jump off the building, but make a sound choice. Think. So even when I want to get mad now and do certain things, I'm not saying that I won't do it, but I've thought, okay, how long is it going to take me to get out of jail? How much are people going to sue me? I think the whole movie out now. And that comes from my father. I feel him saying, think, son, think. You know what I mean? And I think that helps me more than just about anything on this earth.
That did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to leave an impression. He was supposed to get it. He was supposed to digest it, and it was supposed to become a part of him, to where also I take that as him cementing a separation between thinking and logic and how he feels, where his emotional standpoint is. Okay, so there are definitely, like we talked about, pros and cons when it comes to, having a very stern parent that is non-affectionate, that is closed off to the point where it's hard to read. Does this parent really love me? When as long as they're not being abusive and they're not crossing that line or that fine line, you can construe it as a love language. That is how they either were taught or that is what they learned in how to communicate, right? So when you're talking about, let's cover real quickly the cons, right? So we're talking about difficulty with emotional expression. So when you don't receive it, it's hard to express it to somebody else because you don't know what you don't know. Not only are we taught that something exists, but we're taught how to make it manifest, how to make it work. There's a process in it. There's a system in it, right? So if it's never been shown to us or demonstrated to us, then how would we know how to, or what the norm is, or what the majority, how they interact with people? And so it becomes foreign to us when all of a sudden we grow into our own, we get out into what they call the real world, and you got people walking up to you and just want to hug you, and you don't do hugs. You ain't never really came from no home where you've been indulged with a whole bunch of physical affection or reaffirmations. There's just a lot of different things that you don't get from a stern parent, because a lot of times if a parent is super stern, it's not going to, they're going to make sure that you get the message. Therefore, it will cement, and in their mind, it will reverberate deeper if they withdraw or they don't mix affection with that. So, yeah, I'm not here to love you. I'm here to raise you. I'm here to prepare you for the real world. That's how I show you I love you. That my love language is not communicating the goo goo gaga stuff and trying to make you feel better because you know, if you in a slump or you walking around talking about you depressed or you broke up with your little girlfriend, this and that and the other. The fact of the matter is that this is what it's going to require for you to make it out here in this real world. The only other thing that I want to mention, because there we could go on and on based off of perspective and how you looking through this in the lens that you're looking at it through, is strained parent and children connection. And it was very apparent that with David Banner, there was an estrangement, even though he loved and respected him. Unbeknownst to him, he did not know how his dad really felt about him. Not young anyway, not in the midst of it all, right? Like he said, he used to beat on his head and tell him to think. I know most people would be offended if a parent did that, especially maybe out in public, or they did it repetitively as a form of, you know, scolding you or correcting, you know, you. It can definitely be received in a different way other than kind. Okay, so when it comes to the vulnerability of a child or a son and a parent, again, for the conversation, we're speaking of sons, of the son and the parent relationship, it can definitely be received in a way that strains the relationship, that definitely causes somewhat of a disconnect, right? So a lack of affection can create emotional distance, which definitely affects communication. So now, will that, even though that son respects you, will he feel comfortable in coming to you with critical decisions, with certain situations, without feeling like he's going to be judged? I will see y'all soon. Thank you so much for coming through. And if I missed anything, charge it to my head and not my heart. So I'm out, y'all. Peace.